Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our riveting, exciting, challenging session. And today we're putting the spotlight on Africa and religion. So please join us. Can I just remind you that this is a live session, so we do take questions and comments. Please don't wait till last minute because we may not get to yours. As soon as it comes to mind, type it through and we'll get it coming through. So as usual, I'm not alone. I have with me in panel, we have our resident experts, our own walking encyclopedia, Wikipedia, our own Mfundisi Nkosi. Welcome back, Mfundisi.
Thank you very much.
And then today we have a special guest, a new guest. His name is Hlomuza Khanye, otherwise known as HK. Those who attended Kelvin on Ether will know that he is a teacher, so we trust that he's well read. This is a comfort area for him. Welcome, HK.
Thank you, Tante. Thank you, Pana.
Awesome. So we're talking anything Africa and religion. So whatever is in your mind about Africa and religion. But as I was preparing, I did some research and I found some stats that I thought would be interesting. So we're looking at religion in Africa, and this is the latest in 2020. So it says 2020, and this is Africa, the continent. 2020, Africa was 49%, has been 49% Christian, 42% Islam, 8% traditional faiths, and then other. Now, the spread is really largely, Christian is largely Southern Africa, right? Middle to Southern Africa. And then Islam is largely your Eastern and Northern Africa. And then Western Africa is a mixture of both. So if you know, for example, Nigeria is strongly Christian and strongly Islam as well. And there also is some strong traditional African beliefs across there. And then I looked specifically at South Africa. In South Africa, we are 79.9% Christian. I repeat, 79.9% Christian. Now, this doesn't mention whether it's practicing or non-practicing. These are just the stats in terms of what people claim. And then 1.9% Islam, 18.5% other. Other includes African traditional beliefs that have no Christian flavor to them as well. And this in comparison to 1911, where we were 45% Christian. So Christianity has definitely grown in the last century. So Mfundisi, I think it would be a good place to start to look at what are some of the myths about Africa and religion?
I'm sorry, thank you very much. Some of the myths, I suppose you are talking about external views.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. The first myth is that the African continent is a historically dark continent. Dark epistemologically and culturally, and as well as in terms of technology and so on. But the darkness was articulated by outsiders within spirituality. They thought we were worshipping things other than the Creator God. Something very alien to us, because Africa appears in the Bible, right from Genesis 1 up to the last book of the Bible. Africa is also the domain where a lot of Christian history occurred, including the birth of our Lord. Because before 1918, the Middle East was either what we call Palestine was called North Africa, what we call Saudi Arabia was called East Africa. The Suez Canal did not exist until 1867. So people could walk over that isthmus, which is why the Israelites could walk on foot back home to Canaan.
Wow. Okay, I mean, that's already loaded just in what you've already said there. But let me come to you, HK. What were some of the things you grew up believing about just Africa and religion?
I think most of the things come from the way, the things that we were practicing, that when the Europeans came, and then we had to let them off. So those things are the ones that that created this mist around the first question that you asked, to say, did these people bring God, or what happened? So I think there are certain things that we were practicing in our attempt to finding God that seemed deplorable, kind of, or seemed not to be good in the modern practice of Christianity. So I think those are maybe the way we did maybe our sacrifices, maybe the way we used symbols of worship, just to pick up a few, and I think, and also the way we dressed, maybe also the way when we were practicing our tradition, we would get up into another state, which is quite different from when we are practicing Christianity now. I think those things should be unpacked. I think these are the ones that maybe made people think that we did not have God or didn't believe in God. I think, for me, I think that's where the issues are that need to be unpacked.
So, Mfundisi, you right out there say Africans can be traced from Genesis 1.
Yes.
Do you want to expand on that?
The term Adama means black earth or dark earth. That's what it means. The Bible has a tendency, which is an African practice, of naming things after where they come from. Eve was called woman because she was taken from the man. So it would not, and science, by the way, genetics has proved even as recently as in the past 5 years, that the African gene is the dominant gene globally, and that whites have secondary genes in the creation scale, because historically human beings were dark-skinned and not fair-skinned.
Actually, on that point, I mean, the cradle of humankind is traced right here to behind, not too far, like 30 minutes away from where we are, the cradle of humankind. And people come from all over the world to see where it all started. So you would think then we could link that to the origin. I was also reading about just where Eden is, where the Garden of Eden is. Right. And it's also traced to Africa in terms of exactly what you're saying, that Mesopotamia and Euphrates, then where the rivers were based, which are two of the 4 rivers that surrounded the Garden of Eden, was considered Africa. And we don't teach that history anymore. We don't learn that history. In fact, I don't know if we've ever learned that history. When you search and you look at when did Christianity, for example, come to Africa, or specifically in South Africa, you're told it came when the colonizers came. So it's traced to the Portuguese in the 15th century and the Dutch in the 16th century. And yet it predates that, because some script refers to, for example, the Ethiopian eunuch who was then baptized by Philip right around just after Christ's death, which is then the 1st century. So how did we get it so wrong? How do we as Africans lose that sense of history so much that we end up believing that actually this is not ours, this is a foreign thing that was brought to us on the dromedaries?
Most Africans had never seen a European, except those who had had contact with Romans. And because Europe was largely pagan. Europe was largely pagan, while what we call the Middle East and Africa were influenced by Christianity. Europe was also very illiterate, barbaric. If you study the history of the Huns, for instance, you'll be shocked. The guys after whom Hungary was named. But let's not go to Europe now. The one reason why God planted the Garden of Eden at the point where He planted it was that the northern part of Africa and what we call the Middle East are generally more central in terms of the global map between East and West, which is why the Lemba people plus other African groups are found in Africa, Southern Africa, in the United States of America, in Europe, and in Asia. Some Chinese are historically dark-skinned people. A research that some of us have been doing has shown that a very, very interesting fact, that a lot of black Christian artifacts are found in Russia. You know, that I was even saying to my wife, the devil could have been trying to hide something by creating communism. Museums in Russia are, they are bars with African artifacts related to the Jews. And there are even black communities in Russia. These governments never told us.
Does it matter, HK? Does it really matter in the broader scheme of things that, okay, yes, history has been tampered with, but I mean, we have the Bible now and we know who God is, and we can, to a large extent, live and prepare for the world to come. Does it really matter that this history has been tampered with?
I think for me it does. I think from your question, there is an issue of bringing God in terms of being formally written in the Bible, and that perception to say it was brought by the European, or it creates an attitude or an impression to say we're in the dark, there was no way you could have known God. So rewriting that history or discussing that then makes people become aware that we're not in that state that is we perceive or is the story that is being told. We're also had access to God, but maybe we might discuss issues of how we're worshiping Him, or that's another discussion. But in terms of them bringing Christ, God into Africa, it could not be. So for me, I think it's very important, that question, how the history is. Because if we don't have the right history, how then do we begin to appreciate things the way things are? And how do we move forward from there? For me, I think it's very important.
How do we trust oral history, though? Because, I mean, something that's documented, that's here, it outlives me, and no one can dispute it because it's there, in literally in black and white. How do I trust word of mouth? Because that can, how do I trust that that's valid? Isn't that a valid argument for saying, let's rather than trust what's written and documented than what's been passed on because my grandfather said, because his grandfather said, etc., etc.? Any one of you,
I want to respond to your question by saying that the historical, what we call Jews, historical humanity, were sacred communities. They were communities whose epistemology and lifestyles were centered around the worship of God. Throughout the Old Testament, you find religion as a central defining pillar of life. By the way, there was no written Bible for the first 2,500 years of this earth's history. The Bible only came 2,500 years after Adam. But throughout those centuries and 2 millennia and a half, people stuck to what their forefathers had told them. There were variations, of course, here and there. And as you read the Old Testament, you discover that some people moved out of the way through the fall created a lot of ramifications around worship. But nothing was completely lost in terms of what God had told the early generations. Which is why when God felt that the Israelites had gone too far from Him, He would surrender them to captivity or wars and also make them disperse. Because dispersions were also a part of God's way of distributing, of making the world know about him. I mean, if the Jews had remained in Israel, they would turn themselves into a shrine. And you and I, who moved from the central part of, another part of Africa, would not know what they were taught, because we would have been far from this, what I would call the port, to use an African idiom. You get the point? So migration has been an advantage to Christian mission, but it has also created ramifications that made us part from the original model. And I mean, the whole question of ancestral worship is not found in the Bible. But it evolved over a period of centuries because we moved away from where the text was located.
So it not being found in the Bible, does that invalidate it?
What?
Ancestral worship.
Not necessarily, but it contradicts fundamental Bible principles and teachings. Remember, God says to Adam and Eve, the day you eat of that fruit, you will surely die. In the Hebrew, it's very emphatic. It actually says, die, you will die. It gives you the impression that the death will take place twice. You get the point? And indeed, the death resulting from sin, the cosmic death, is both physical, spiritual, and psychological. Let me prove it with a statement Ellen White made some years ago, before she died. She argued that the current humanity does not even use a quarter of its brain, a tenth of its brain. Russian scientists discovered 60 years later that indeed human beings don't never use even half of their brains. So what we call geniuses are dull people to God. They happen to be the more intelligent of the dull people. Get the point? So that's what sin has done. It has caused a lot of cosmic damage. First in our bodies. I mean, in the book Early Writings, Ellen White is shown a vision of the saints in heaven soon after they land there. And she says she saw Adam and Eve being the tallest beings in the community of saints, and later she saw tears flowing down his face when she considered what his sin had caused to the height of human beings. Yeah. So heaven is not merely about going to a place of beauty, but we're going to a place where we're going to be restored to the original height human beings should have had. In other words, after 1,000 years, you come here, visit from another planet, you're going to find us as tall as Adam.
Wow, okay. So, HK, how has this affected you? This seeming tug of war between you, the African, and you, the Christian? Or has there been any tug of war for you in your personal life?
There is. For me, let me start from when we accepted Christianity. We were not quite clear of the things that we're supposed to let go. So for us, I think the interpretation we're given, or the teachings that we're given, is that we're supposed to let almost everything and then accept this teaching. So now the tug came in. Now later, when we beginning to realize, no, there are certain things that we could have kept ourselves without letting them go, maybe in terms of the way we sing, maybe in terms of the way we do certain things. So I think that tug came in that way. So I'm in that space. Even personally, though, I would have accepted that certain things they were still okay, but also the external is still saying, no, you are kind of confused. So I think there is that break within myself, coming from internal and also coming from the external. So I think with that space, I wish maybe it could have been presented in a way to say, okay, we are not saying our origins as a black person, or my origin as a black person, they were purely good. They could have accepted this God the way we were. But I accept that there are certain things that I should have let. But maybe the question is which ones I should not have let. So that created that tension. I accept.
And just to follow up on that, so you're raising a son. So what are you saying to your son then about this? Or are you also just passing on this confusion to your son?
It is quite a difficult thing, but one thing that I like, there's been some, I think as all of us, or maybe churches or ourselves as families, we've begun to realize the gaps that were created by all this history. So the conversations are not only at home, they're also even external. So I think when I'm raising a son, I'm saying to him, listen, open up your ear. There are things that are like this. This is where we are coming from. This is where we are going. You might need to open up. Be open to knowledge, as I'm also open to knowledge. Maybe the question is, how long will it take? So I have to make him conscious of where we are coming from and where we are going.
And are you seeing any change in yourself? Because you're saying in your mindset, but in terms of your practices and your actions, as you become more and more conscious of, as you become more and more touched or shaken by exactly what you feel we actually could have kept and what we've missed out on.
Yes, I do feel some changes. Maybe for me, I'm at this space where I'm saying, or as an observation, I think one of the challenges that we have also have is that even though we embraced Christianity or the Bible, I don't think we have fully benefited as Africans. There are no tangible, let's say tangible or visible things that we can share. I think we are more of being short to evangelize, or I'm in that space where I say go and evangelize, but I'm not sure whether I'm carrying a tangible thing that I can share with people to say, out of accepting God, this is what I have. So I think where we are challenged, myself and as a church or everyone, we need to then start to show up the benefits of God, because otherwise to other people it's like there is another alternative. If this thing is not failed, it has failed, then I can go back to ancestral rulership. I think it's creating that space. So I am in that space where I'm saying I should show visible or tangible or fruits of this thing that I have accepted. Then I would close those gaps.
That's heavy. That's quite deep, Mfundisi. Maybe if I can bring you in here. So what should be those tangible benefits or evidence of us taking on Christianity in the form that it's been repackaged to us, when it was brought to us then with the Bible? And so, because we did believe before, right? But it's been repackaged and repurposed, and should there be any betterment? That's a terrible word. Yes, of ourselves then, because they remember they were told to take it out to the world and evangelize and so they did that. They did that from the first century, and they've been doing that. So you can then say, well, the missionaries were doing what they believe they're meant to do, right? Take aside political agendas and all of that. Are they really? Here's a nice young man who's saying, I'm not really seeing any tangible difference that has made to where I was before this form of Christianity actually came into my life and to our people's lives.
Yeah, I think this question is one of those that are not easy to deal with, because the answer cannot be found in one statement. It should be found in a programmatic system that deals, first of all, with where we were robbed by colonization, where we were deceived by missionary Christianity, and also where global development misguided African people. Our epistemic center is now Europe. It's America. It's all over except in Africa. And one of the things that happens is that in history, when you teach people a language, your language, you teach them an epistemology. That's one of the major victories of Western powers. They taught us their language. Every time you learn a new language, you learn a new way of designing language. You also learn the history behind that language. You also learn a new way of interpreting your own language. Which is why many Africans today in South Africa can't speak pure languages. but they articulate English as if they are these relatives of Queen Elizabeth. You get the point? So the task of recovering what was lost is so phenomenal. We can only talk about a particular area. I can talk about how we can fix African Adventism, because that's where I am. How I can fix my township, because that's where I am. But a global movement would meet a lot of confusion and opposition. And I think the question you have asked needs more than just a session like this one, because there are too many things that have gone into this stew. Even some of us who are in the Christian faith have cooked stews that are very harmful. It's unfortunate that even Africa itself no longer has valid biblical Christianity, because our Christianity has been highly syncretized by our ancestral beliefs and our pragmatic practices, because every religion responds to what is coming towards it. And in the process, it either fights or retreats or reshapes itself to meet the challenge, or embraces that challenge. And when there's an embrace, you must know there can also be adulteration. I mean, look at our weddings, for instance. Look at our weddings. They're highly adulterated. There's Africa and Europe in there. And also there's paganism as well. Yeah, because some of the things we do in our weddings, you cannot explain scripturally. Yeah.
Just a reminder to you watching at home that we are live. If you have any questions or even a comment that you'd like to pass through, please do so before we run out of time. Africans and religion, it's a broad topic, but where is it hitting you right now? Where is it touching? What's in your mind? What's that thought that you'd always wanted to share, or that no one has actually ever answered for you? Mfundisi, or even to both of you, what has made Africans so susceptible to other practices? Because, I mean, if we had our strong beliefs that we held on to, even the Christianity as we knew it from the 1st century onwards, I mean, I was reading and it says during the 4th century, the Ethiopian king Ezana made Christianity the kingdom's official religion, right? And I mean, as Africans, we do trace a lot of our strong Christianity to Ethiopia.
Yes.
What's made us so susceptible then to the European packaged version that we grappled with, even then losing or dropping some of what was actually our strong beliefs?
I think the gateway that whites found easy to walk through was our Ubuntu philosophy. We recognize whites as human beings. The Sotho-Tswana word, makua, many people don't know where it comes from. It means, especially if you talk to someone who comes from Botswana, they know it comes from. Makua originates from the word khiwa, to be. They say the whites were spewed by the sea because they came here by the sea, and in the voyage they lost their blackness because of the saltiness of the sea. So it is those who were vomited by the sea. That's the meaning of the word mahua. Those who were vomited by the sea. So they suffered desalination in the process, because the original African ethnology says all of us are dark-skinned. Whites were dark-skinned because they moved across the sea. It is basically the immediate way in which they explained the whiteness of their skin. In other words, whites lost complexion.
Okay, so I want to bring it back to
Yes.
how can Ubuntu,
Yeah.
this nice strong concept, work against us so much? What is it then a weak concept? Such, I mean, you would think it's something solid, right? Because it's saying I recognize you as a human being. But how does it then work against us so much?
Ubuntu can work against us. Ubuntu has not survived the presence of rugged cultures around it, because other cultures that have invaded us are not humanistic, they are materialistic. You get the point? So the challenge of African people in Africa, let me say Southern Africa, was that when whites came here, they came with a lot of mythology. They also came with a technology that suited them but did not suit us. They refused, they failed to walk in, as we say as Indians say, to walk in our moccasins. They saw us walking on foot and they gave us shoes because they thought the idea of walking on foot is hidden and uncouth. And yet we had shoes, isn't and it's a process that took some years. The idea also that they were given was that Africa was a continent to be given light, to be colonized, to be civilized, to be anglicized, to be Christianized. The package was a pig stew, and it continues to this day in more subtle ways than we can tell. I think also that even the term modernization needs to be revisited, because the question should be asked, modernization on whose terms? What is the epistemology of modernization? What is the epistemology of post-modernization? And Africa has become, unfortunately, the hiding place or the home of all these evil doctrines that have landed on it. Communism, Marxism, materialism, paganism, and all these other things that now have clouded our thinking. I know that I've gone beyond, perhaps even beside the question it asked, but my view is that we need a time when we can relook at what actually happened and then create something like a curriculum to remove the debt. But it's going to take us, even if it takes us an age, God will bless the fact that we have started removing the debt.
Well, why I'm asking is because Africa is not the only continent that was colonized, right? And yet, if you look at some of the Asian countries, for example, or people, Christianity in particular is not that strong. Look at India. There was a strong. I mean, they're part of the Commonwealth, and the British they were a British colony, quote unquote. And yet, there's very strong Hindu practice that is still practiced there. And yet Africa is now at 82%, no, I lie, 91% Christian and Islam. So what is it about us that makes us susceptible to that extent that we can then let go of what is ours?
I think the philosophy, doctrine, and practice of Ubuntu, because historically it is related to Christian principles, made us susceptible to the wrongs whites did against us. Because, number one, let's talk about Southern Africa. We're far from where we were initially. So we did not have the text. Whites came here with paper, they started writing things and so on. And we thought that writing was something superior. And because they then also thought the Bible was written by their own people, they were ignorant, these missionaries, by the way. Yeah, whites did not colonize the Bible. They thought it was their text, which is why they're embarrassed now when we send the nonsense back to them and tell them, no, this is our book, bring it back. You have inserted a wrong interpretive model on it. And so what I think we need to do now is to create our own curriculum around the Bible, our origins, who we are as Africans, and go back to those simple things that we can still be able to do. But one of the fundamental things we need to do is to reuse the earth for developmental purposes. You need to have a garden in your yard, however small it might be, a farm, because God planted people in a garden. You see, this is a fact. Yeah. So the question of land in the Bible becomes very critical for us to return to the plan of God, and that's where whites are going to resist the new epistemic model we might develop, because all that they've been doing is to steal land by all means. And unfortunately, we live in a government now that is pussyfooting on that issue. They know that if they move in that direction, there might be a third world war here.
In fact, this week's lesson, for those of us who are Adventists, actually I think it was on Wednesday or Tuesday, it spoke about the fact that the Lord promises that the land will be returned, right? So if the land is going to be returned, maybe all the land should be returned to it was taken from.
But by the way, could I say something? This is my suspicion. I've got a suspicion, I can't validate it, that many whites who claim they have title deeds could have been given title deeds out of a fiat dispensation. Give them title deeds so that future generations might think he had a right to it. That's my suspicion. Honestly, that I stand to be corrected, but I suspect that if we were to go through all the billions of title deeds whites have, we might find that somewhere along the line there was faking.
Well, yes, because who
How,
has the right to
how
give
could
title
they
deeds?
own more land than the land we need as a population? How could we own 13% of the land and the rest is owned by them when they're less than 13% of the population? I don't understand the logic. This thing has no mathematical sensibility. It does not make sense to me. And why did they take so much land? Why? Take a flight to Cape Town. The moment you pass the Free State, there is an amount of empty land there, but it is marked. I'll tell you why. Some of their ammunition is hidden in the Northern Cape. That's why this country will be defended from the Northern Cape if it is attacked from the north.
Wow, okay. So, back to religion, right? Yes. No. Because I want to now link that. So, do you think then bringing Christianity, the way it was packaged to Africa, and maybe we can talk about South Africa or Southern Africa, was deliberate because it was meant to then pacify us,
Yes.
to make us forgiving and sweeter and kinder and loving and all of that, so that we then don't address these things that actually should be addressed.
Remember also that during the time of slavery, when our brothers and sisters were taken to the Caribbean and North America, whites removed all texts in the Bible that dealt with personal responsibility, accountability, ownership, land owner, and they remained with verse. They created a Bible which was called the Slave Bible. It does not have all these. It's not as big as the one that you read. And because these guys, they had not seen the original Bible, they thought that was all there was in the Bible. When they discovered that the Bible was bigger than that, then you see this in the spirituals that what we call the Negro people started composing. Many of them refer to stories that you find in the Bible, because this going back to God was the only survival they had. Yeah, so I think God is holding the forces of violence in this country so that certain things happen. But frankly, whites need to confess that they've stolen this land. Stolen our spirituality, distorted our spirituality, and even done things that are unthinkable. Okay.
So I've got a question from one of our audience members, and I think a comment as well, so please allow me. So I'm not checking my WhatsApps, I'm reading your messages, so do likewise. So this one, this is just a shout out to you, Mfundisi. He says, Mfundisi, you're on fire today. Land to the rightful owners. And it's biblical. We read about it in the lesson about that in Isaiah, it's promised that the land should be returned. It says, are we therefore saying that our African worship was so irrelevant in the greater scheme of worship that it had to be whitewashed by quote-unquote Christianity? This is not to encourage a separatist ideology, but surely our Creator who made us different would accept worship that is different in the form, though same in principle. And this is from Anonymous. Because what was wrong with the way we were doing things, right? I mean, there were some practices, but I think that's common across all people. There were some practices because we're so far from the origin, right, from Adam and Eve. But what was wrong with the way we were doing things? we believed in one God, right?
Yes, yeah.
We believed in a God, the creator. Africans believe that God
Yeah,
created. And we lived our lives with an acknowledgement of that. So I'm with Anonymous there to say, maybe we need to start reclaiming who we are in light of our relationship with God without losing what principle is, right? Your thoughts on that?
Can I go further?
Yes.
And tell you that what I believe should happen now inside the Adventist church is for blacks to hold a unique indaba. A unique indaba throughout this country. If it can't be done, it can't be done by the union, the first union will never do that. Some church should stage an indaba and say, we are lost, let's go back. Where do we go back to? We go back to the understanding that, number one, we're the first creation. Whites are secondary creation. Genetics has proved this. Even white genetics have proved that dark-skinned people are the original human beings in this world. Two, and that we ask God for forgiveness for all the evils we have done. And evils done by our ancestors. And then create structures to consolidate our Africanity. Our Africanity. Within the family, in the church, and in the community. Unfortunately, we're going to be disturbed by political models that we have adopted. But the Adventist church can start acting as a community. The Black Adventist church, whites, let's leave them aside because I don't know them. I'm increasingly beginning not to understand white people as I grow older, because I don't understand why they've refused to accept certain truths which are in the Bible.
The same Bible.
The same Bible that they brought to us. Yes, yeah. Yes. They can't see that the Bible was written by black people. What makes them fail to see that there's more Africa in the Bible than Europe? Why?
Can I just add to that?
Yes.
There's a comment and a question from Africa, ironically, Africa Simom Gopozi, who says, can you please elaborate more on African Adventism? How does it differ from European or American Adventism, since the church books we read here in Africa are the same books that they read there?
There's no difference at all. The problem is that in Africa we're captured. In Europe and in America, the whites own the epistemology, which is why they will never depart from using white pictures in picture rolls in books and so on. Because the day they stop and go back to biblical art, they will lose the money from white people. White people want to know why you are dropping us from history, from scripture. Because frankly, a white Jesus is an anomaly to the Bible. The Bible does not know a white Jesus. Why did his parents hide in Egypt and not in England? You see this object is white. I can only hide it in a file that has white papers. If I take it to a black space, it will be found. Simple standard one logic. Simple standard one. So what I think we need now, I'm trying to avoid using the word revolutionary thinking, but that's where I am. Yeah. Post-COVID, we need a totally new church. I'm arguing now, even in the papers that I'm writing, that we need a post-COVID Adventist church in South Africa, not the one that is paralyzed now or dead, in which our pastors were groomed. Thank you.
I actually have another comment that talks to what you're saying there as well. This is from Ati Mlanjana. He says, Africans, I believe, are the majority in the global SDA church. As Africans, the changes we want to see are largely dependent on our seriousness, unity, and ability to refuse bribes. Hey?
Yes.
He says, everything always boils down to economics. Hunger has made us easily bought and easily controlled.
It's a fact. Let me tell you something that will happen. The moment we set up a movement to restore the Bible to our ethnology, to restore the Bible to our people, to speak the truth that the Bible has spoken to all humanity, some of us will transfer their allegiance to Silver Spring. They'll start spying on us because Yeah, but so how shall we live in the absence of white people? How did we live before 1652? That's a question I often have. I said we survived in the absence. In fact, we survived longer than we have survived since they arrived here. I don't need a white man to be my intercessor between God and my parents are enough, and Jesus. You get the point? So I think what we need here, we no longer need to deal with agendas that come from the West. We need to answer questions that come from Africa, because this continent will not be saved under its present conditions. And by the way, it's a scandal that the Adventist Church in South Africa, with all the technology we have here, has hardly hit 500,000 since the 1880s. We've hardly hit 500,000, and I think in my thinking, I think God is refusing to allow us to grow until we're genuine.
Wow. HK, is Umfundisi inciting a revolution here?
Not at all. For me, I think he's saying, I think we need to have a discussion amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
It sounds stronger than a discussion.
Okay. So I think maybe he's saying there are issues maybe we need to address as a people or as a church or as individuals. Like I initially said, I think as Africans, or myself in particular, we are looking for a meaning.
Yeah.
I think let's put it that way. We're looking for a meaning, or we're looking for a religion that will bring a meaning to our lives, and that will be also beneficial. So, because I think there is also another side to it. People are thinking we are fighting Christianity, and then they're thinking everything about being African is also beneficial. It's also not true. There are certain things that in the African society, practices that were condemned.
Yes.
You would not just come and say, and then they just accept it.
Yeah.
No. Like what we're seeing these days. So I'm just saying we are also bringing two extremes where in our attempt to address the ills of religion, we might drive other people to the other extreme and thinking everything that on the other side is also beneficial.
Yes.
I think we need to address that. Africans had systems of checking things, not every practice.
Yes.
There were practices that were known. If you would say, so they will find out behind that person, are there not cases that are going to come around it?
Okay.
So I'm just bringing an example. So, because I always get worried around this discussion, especially with other people, because they're thinking then there's an alternative that will, also that alternative that we're thinking about, yes, it also is challenges. So we as Africans, as myself, we are looking for something that has got a meaning that will, and the reason I think we asked this, a first question where we said, why were we susceptible to Western religion? I think more than anything else, if you look at our tradition, even though we had no Bible, it was in line with what Christianity teaches.
That's right.
And in particular, Ubuntu, if you look at it, it draws. You can look at Beatitudes, Matthew 5. Most of the things that are there actually can be narrowed down to Ubuntu.
Yes.
So for me, I think what Food is saying, let's look into ourselves as nations, as individuals. Maybe how we do it could be the voice that she's putting across, which I don't know. But I'm just saying we need to really look into a lot of things, because otherwise even this Christian that we are seemingly practicing, we are not even practicing it. So what's the benefit?
Yeah.
So I think the question still rings. What are we doing? Is it benefiting us? Where is it taking us to? It should be a true, pure religion. That's me.
Could I make a comment, Sister?
Yes.
Are you aware that in the TOC now, there's a rise of a voice that is becoming pro-polygamy? There are people now who are saying, nowhere in the Bible is polygamy condemned. And actually, there's nowhere. Polygamy was stopped by the Roman Empire, by the way. It was not stopped by Jesus. Jesus never spoke against polygamy. No part of the Bible speaks against polygamy. I'm not saying let's move that way. But all I'm trying to say is we need to be aware of, I will confirm what he says. We need a new indaba that will say what was brought into Africa which was wrong. Let's put it aside. How did we tarnish the religion ourselves? Put it aside and then go for valid biblical principles. Yeah.
And in fact, Mfundisi, when I was reading there, one of the it says Islam is one of the fastest growing religions, not just in Africa, but apparently in the world.
Yes.
And in Africa in particular, this issue of polygamy is a big decider for someone who's neither Christian nor Muslim,
Yes.
who still wants to stick to what they believe is their African traditions. Islam allows that more than Christianity actually does.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, though, as we start winding down, why has God allowed this? Why has God allowed the Bible to be weaponized the way it has by because that's what people, like some of our friends who are not Christians will ask me, like, but this God that you believe in, then why is he allowed himself to be weaponized the way he has by these, as you said, hooligans, right? Barbarians. Yeah, why is he allowed this?
Go to European history. There's a lot of paganism. Lot of paganism. Ancestralism is not an African thing. It belongs to all of us. To this day, whites still believe in ancestors. We never had Satanism because the concept Satan did not exist in African thought, which is why we use the word that comes from Persia, Hasatan. It's not even a Jewish. The word Hasatan is Persian. It comes from other cultures. The Bible often talks about an enemy. You know, Jesus says, he's being asked, who did it? He said, no, an enemy did it. And all we know is that Lucifer fell and he started creating damage all over. We talk of a fallen angel, but we don't have the term Hasatan. It's new to us. And I think some people might think I'm being radical. We need a session, apart from a business session where we elect this person and that person into office, where we rediscuss who we are, number one, what we got from the missionaries, and then say, this was what was good, and this is what they did wrong, let's throw it away. What did God say we should do and be? Otherwise, we're not going to, God is not going to grow a church in this country that is syncretic. I'm being honest with you. It's a scandal that we're hardly 500,000 after more than 100 years. It's a scandal. Do you know there were 50,000 Zionists in 1910? How many are there today? They are between 32 and 35% of African Christianity in South Africa.
So
Shembe alone commands more than 3 million people, just like the men in Pudukwan. Yeah.
So are you saying, Mfundisi, God has he left us alone because we have let our guard down? Because it still is. I mean, his word is being used against his people in Africa, in America with the slavery, all over the world. His word is being used against his people. How is he allowing that to continue for as long as it has?
Theologians often talk of what is called the intentional will of God and the unintentional will of God. Sometimes God stops something. Sometimes God allows something to run until it rots. Until those who are using it discover this model does not work. But I think in the context of a time that within Adventist eschatology is becoming shorter and shorter, we need to walk with haste now. Because her generation and her friends are not going to tolerate what you and I have tolerated. All they will do is not to fight but leave the church. Because this generation does not fight churches, it simply leaves. We are fighters, all right? And what we need is to create a church now that will keep them comfortable.
Well, we fighters, but we haven't really fought, have we?
Unfortunately, we haven't started. We're complainants, perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah, we're complainants, just vain complainants. But I think we also don't need to be fighters. We need to build the valid church in Africa now. It is time we evangelized Africans ourselves. Because whites did their work. We need to thank them for what they did. But certainly, we need to tell them that the stew had a lot of curry in it. Yeah, it's bitter more than being tasty.
So HK, when a friend of yours says to you, my brother, an African friend of yours says to you, my brother, why are you still doing this? Why are you still practicing this religion that has come and diluted who you are as an African and caused so much confusion? What do you say?
It is a tough one. I've got so many friends, let me be honest. And sometimes I can't even evangelize to them because more than anything else, I think even if you look at, especially lately, what Christianity has done is quite embarrassing to be associated with being a Christian. I think maybe from time to time, there are certain things that we can pick up, the positives, patience, maybe through our own lives, to say, maybe as you relate with someone, he notices certain things and then maybe try to project to say, it's because of the religion that has kept me this way. But in terms of selling religion currently, it's a struggle, let's be honest.
Okay, so why have you stayed?
Like I'm saying, personally, why I've stayed, I have personal experiences around religion. I come from a traditional family, and where, like I'm saying, all the people who advocate for tradition, I always say they also don't have enough information.
Okay.
And because I actually know what happens there also. So I always say, they also, for me, it's a question of looking where I come from and also look at what Christianity has done for me. So, and then also when we are discussing, you need to also look at levels. Not everyone knows. Some people challenge what you believe, not because they know they have a better alternative, but because maybe it's just for the challenge. So I think we need to engage. That's what I'm saying. As we are discussing Christianity, we also need to discuss maybe tradition and also its ills and also its shortfalls. Because I know so many people don't know what happens there.
Yeah.
That's personal. Yes.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing, Mfundisi, as we start winding down, if you do have a question or a comment, you still have a few minutes left to touch base with us. Otherwise, the conversation can continue afterwards. But what I'm hearing, Mfundisi, and what I'm hearing from HK is that we should also not romanticize what happened before the white man came with his repackaged religion, because it also was not necessarily perfect or ideal.
It's a fact, yeah.
So we need to find a happy medium or hybrid, I don't know if that's the right word, that takes us to the truth of what God wants from us. And we can get that from both packages.
Do you know, one of the things that surprises me is that Adventism in Africa has grown more popularly beyond the Limpopo River. It is here. By the way, there are more whites here than in all part of Africa combined. Yeah, so we have a heavy load of epistemological debt here that we need to deal with. And the challenges has even become more complex in the last 20, 30 years. Because South Africa has become a microcosm of the continent. All countries are here. I'm being honest with you. In terms of population, all countries are here. Which means also that all theories are here. All practices are here. We may not see them. And all the degradation is here. And the sad part of it, if you look at it politically, whites have stayed away, they've gone beyond the mountain, they are sitting over there looking at us through glass eyes and saying, you see, we told you, these are monkeys. They can't fix even their own home. And the present political dispensation has excused them from the evils for which they should have been punished in other countries. Yeah.
So, in the last minute or so that we have, what are your final thoughts on this? And I mean, I know we've only just scratched the surface. This conversation can go, but I think it's a good starting point to just stop and point and say, I'm an African and I'm also religious. What does that mean? And how can those two coexist healthily within me so that one doesn't cannibalize the other?
Okay.
What are your last thought for the person who's watching and grappling with just that journey for themselves?
I'm proposing that post-COVID, every Adventist congregation in suburbs and townships should hold an indaba and say, where do we come from? What did we gain? What can we keep? What can we drop? Which way do we want to go? What do we take into the future? This is the time for us to start creating a new stew, because the old one will not sustain us in the future.
Wow, thank you, Mfundisi. And final words from you, HK? Yeah, where to from here?
For me, I think especially if we look at lately what Christianity has done, we, each and every one of us needs to search into our souls and search for ourselves who God is. Because I think we've been too dependent on pastors or on people who are sharing the gospel, because we are desperate for something that changes lives. So we've been exposed. So I think we need to rethink ourselves in our search for God. If you look at what's happening in other churches, it's quite, like I'm saying, I get embarrassed to be a Christian sometimes. Because Christianity embraces everyone. I might be an Adventist, but I still belong to a Christian denomination. So we need to re-look into ourselves and search God for our own, instead of depending. Maybe COVID times are such times that are putting us into our corners to research into our own lives.
Well, thank you very much to both of you. And thank you to those of you at home who joined us and the conversations. And I think our challenge really from this conversation is that maybe we should stop thinking that retracking who we are as Christians is going to paganize us, but actually it may make us even more Christian than what we currently are. So take the time, as my guests have said, go find out who you are in terms of who God intended you to be, and own that with pride. Don't live a life that's defined to you by other, but let God tell you who you are, and then you may find that you actually become even more Christian than what you thought you were. So from my side, Okanconde umntana uThandi Balfour, ndiyabulela ndithi nangamso.
It is a tool.